Hi, my name is TJ. My dad died of overdose on January 1st, 2011, and my mom is a recovering addict. God helped my mom, and now together we are here to help you. Now let's talk recovery. Here's your host, my mom, Susan Sexton-Wood.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Recovery. I'm your host, Susan Sexton-Wood. Today we have a couple special guests really dear to my own heart to talk about a young man that lost his life due to addiction. We're going to talk about Keith Lee, and today we have his mother, Amy Goldstein, and his sister, Nicole, Shandy. And so first we're going to take a minute to listen to Erica Tedder singing One Touch.
Been ostracized for 12 years. I'm used to being alone. Spent everything I had and now it's gone. I'm used to being put down. My issues tell it all. My only hope is anchored in this fall. If I could just touch the hem of his garments, I know I'd be made whole. If I could just press my way through this madness, his love would heal my soul. If only one touch. So many people calling, how could he ever know that just a brush of him would stop the flow? If he knew, would he rebuke me or shame me to the ground? I'm desperate 'cause it's never or it's now. If I could just touch the hem of his garment, I know I'd be made whole. If I could just press my way through this madness, his love would heal my soul. And then suddenly he turned around. He said, somebody has. Well, frightened and embarrassed, I bowed. You see, I told him of my troubles and how I had to touch the hem of his garments, and I know I've been made whole, and how I had pressed my way through this madness. His love has healed my soul. Then with one word he touched the hem of my garment, and you know I've been made whole. Somehow he pressed my Jesus sure enough touched me, and I know I've been made whole.
Thank you for singing that for us, Erica. I know that just the songs that I've heard her sing through the past episodes of Let's Talk Recovery, it's definitely touched my own heart. And, you know, music is definitely inspirational when it comes to the recovery walk and how we can get through sometimes day to day. So our guests today are Amy and Nicole, and we're going to, you know, if you're struggling today to even sit down and watch this show right now, I just encourage you to take the time to listen to Amy and Nicole, and I thank them for coming to share Keith's story with us. Thank you guys for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Keith Lee was a young man that I had the privilege to get to know and to work with in the Winchester area. And this year he lost his battle with addiction. And, you know, through talking with Amy and Nicole, we've had some time to just sit down one-on-one and work through the devastation and the hurt that comes along with not just losing someone, but losing them to addiction and losing them so early in life. And I know that it takes a lot to really talk about his story even still today. And I'm going to try not to cry through this myself because I did know him. And you could tell just the type of person he was. And so one commitment that I made this year was to help them help others know about Keith and to know who he was as a person, because one thing that happens in the addiction world is people use and they may lose their life and you don't hear nothing else about them, and you just hear, you know, male or female, their age, and that they're gone because of overdose, and you don't hear the person that they were and who they touched in this world and
Right.
what they gave to this world while they were here. And so we've made a commitment this year that Keith is another face of Unchained Praises. And so we're going to dedicate that time to getting his story out. And so they're here today to just share who he was and, you know, share a little bit about his addiction and kind of what it had done to your life, and he was in recovery and really working on changing himself, and you know, just the person that he was. If you guys would like to share, Amy, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, like Susan said, Keith was in recovery, like many other addicts. He was in jail and hadn't used in quite a while, and was getting his life on track. And unfortunately, I think he decided to try one more time and lost his life March 14th. And when Keith was in recovery, the biggest thing is to help other people. At his funeral, people came up and they would talk about, you know, when I was in jail. Sorry. You know, Keith helped me. He'd pray with me. He'd talk about, you know, he didn't want to talk about drugs. He wanted to talk about getting clean and having a good life. He didn't want to be a drug addict. And that's who I want. That's who I want people to know. Is he didn't want to be a drug addict. That wasn't who he was. That was his addiction. You know, but he was such a great person and loved everybody. And sadly, at 28, he's gone.
And he did give of himself. You know, I've been in meetings with him, in group meetings and just one-on-one meetings, and he always had the smile, and he always had something positive about the day. And so I didn't know him, you know, of course, as well as you all do, but I did get to know the person that he was. And that's one big thing that we want the world to know, is that it's not about the struggle. You know,
Right.
it's about the person, and you've lost a son and a brother and a father, and you know that's what we want to get across, to break down the stereotype, and for people to know that that person, they're saying, well, there's another one gone.
Right.
That it's more than just a person. You know, this person was somebody, someone, and
Right.
we kind of did that this year in Winchester. It's on Overdose Awareness Day. It was called Somebody, Someone.
Right.
You know, he was your son, and he was Nicole's brother. And Nicole, would you like to share a little bit about Keith and just, you know, the experience, whatever God puts on your heart? This is a lot to put into 30 minutes, and so whatever God's putting on your heart to share with somebody that may be watching.
Keith he was a great person when he was sober. When he wasn't sober, he wasn't himself. He, you know, stole, he lied, he, you know, did everything that everybody does in addiction. But when he was sober, he was great. He loved my kids and his own daughter, and a great uncle. And he struggled for a long time with addiction. It started in high school for him, and just with pills, and then it progressively got worse. One thing led to another, and then he ended up using heroin, and got hooked on that for a really long time. And he went through a lot, and you know, it was hard for us for a long time to even. When Keith started in his addiction, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was real hush-hush. Nobody wanted to, you know, if you had somebody in your family with addiction, nobody wanted to talk about that. And so that was hard for us, because it was hard for us to come out to anybody, to talk to anybody about it, because, you know, we didn't talk about that. And it was, you know, and it was embarrassing almost, because of the way people portray, you know, an addict, and just look at your family like, well, what kind of family did he come from if that's what he's doing? And so it was really hard for us for a long time with him, you know, to keep to ourselves and try to struggle with this addiction with him. And there wasn't as much available as far as getting him help when he initially started using it. We just kept hitting a lot of doors, and so it was really hard for a long time. And then just over the last couple of years, all of the Student U came along, and Unchained Phrases and a lot of other things, and people, like, it hit our community really hard, this heroin addiction and drugs, and and so it opened everybody's eyes up to, like, well, it can happen to anybody. I mean, we grew up in a great household, great parents, great life, and it hit our family, and I think people, people don't think that it can happen to them, and it can happen in any class, any family, whatever, and I think that our community started noticing that, and so a lot of things, started to develop over the years, and it was good to be able to finally, like, have people to talk about and come to us, or be able to have somewhere to go or someone to talk to,
right.
For him, and I still struggled with it, even, once we did have people to talk to and understand what we were going through. It was still hard for me to sometimes accept what he was doing, and I've never been an addict, so I've never experienced anything like that, and so it was even still hard for me to wrap my head around. But even just talking to you and other addicts and things, it helped me to understand him a little bit better. And over the last year, the time before he got incarcerated this time, I really understood a lot better what he was going through, and so I was definitely a lot more supportive than I had been in the past, and it was hard even then, but we still, let him in, and I think he was grateful for that in the end, that we were so accepting of him, and there were a lot of times in our past where, you know, we weren't always. It was hard. It was really hard to help him sometimes, and so in the end, it was he. You know, we understood things a lot better just by talking with you and other people, and so it was easier to handle him and things, I guess. So, you know, and in the end, it didn't work, you know, for him. Like my mom said, I think he just thought maybe one more time, and then, you know, this will be it for me, and then that was his last time, and so we struggle with that still. A lot of questions, a lot of what ifs and things, but he's taught me a lot, and still, even in his death, is teaching me a lot of things.
Right.
So.
And we don't realize, you know, what we're doing to families, and you know, in my own story, I woke up next to my fiance dead of overdose, and so I definitely can relate to you a little bit more. I think with Nicole, Nicole actually is the one that found her brother, and he had plans.
Yep.
You know, he was moving to another state, and he was talking about what he was going to do, and really excited and hopeful, and so you seen like life coming back in, and you know, and I've heard you talk a few times now that he thought he could do it one more time, and there's a lot of people, and there may be a lot of people watching this show that have gone through that, or that are currently going through, you know, in recovery, and it's hard daily. I mean, it's just daily. We have to apply the tools, and we have to adjust our thinking, and really catch the way that we're feeling. And the thought one more time, I think, has probably been in every recovering addict's mind.
Right.
And unfortunately, people are losing their life because not only are they clean at the time that they're thinking one more time, but there's some extra harsh stuff out there with fentanyl and carfentanil, and so, you know, if you are struggling out there tonight, and you're thinking one last time, just know that definitely it could be your last time. Do you each want to share a memory about Keith, like something that just showed his personality and the person he was? You know, you grew up with him, so I'm sure there's a lot of funny stories that you may have, but you know, even just in his recovery, like I know I've heard you talk about him seeing his daughter and just the way that he would light up, and so to share something about him to help others see the person he was and not just the addiction.
The one memory that comes to my mind is, it was actually a few nights before he had passed away. Of course, he had been in and out of jail for several years, and so you could always tell it took him a while to adjust after he got out. And a couple nights before he passed, we were sitting at the dinner table, and my kids were watching him. We had steak for dinner, and my kids were watching him eat steak, and he like could not figure out how to use this knife. And I think my daughter pointed it out to him, and he said, "Well, you have to understand, I've been in jail for a long time, and all we got was rubber sporks." And so he just made a big joke about it, and you know, he would talk about it openly, and so that was one of the funniest memories that just recently, and even the night before he passed, actually, it had snowed, and he'd take my kids out to play with them and it had barely snowed out, like hardly anything on the ground, and he went to get the sleds out and everything because they wanted to sled, and just because they wanted to sled, he said, "Okay, we'll get the sleds out and we'll go sledding," even though there really wasn't much to sled on. But I mean, he loved his nieces and nephews and loved his daughter. He had a lot of fun with them, and he was good with them. So.
What about you, Amy? What's a memory?
I have so many. We had such a great trip the week before he passed. I'm sorry. No, we took a road trip and went back to Pennsylvania and just had so many. It's amazing in 5 days what you can get. But after
To have the sober Keith back for those 5
Yeah, to
days
have-
and to have the old Keith
to have
back
that 5 days, he's out of jail, he's clean, everything's great. It was awesome, and that's what I expected. He was gonna be okay.
Well, and I think that brings up another point is, there are different stages in recovery. We go through a lot of different emotions, and we can be suicidal in addiction, and but once you start that recovery and the light starts coming back and just the plans, and he was talking about a lot of plans. He was planning to stay sober and to just make something of his life, and I think people fail to realize that it's that quick. Like
Right.
it's just a thought, and sometimes if we don't know how to handle that thought, it leads back to using, and it just takes a lot of work for recovery to change our lives, to change our thinking, to address, I am feeling like this, and a lot of times we don't reach out and talk to somebody.
That's what I was going to say. I think the biggest thing is reaching out, and I think that was part of Keith's.
Well, the night
He was
before
embarrassed.
Yeah, and the night before he passed, I could tell something was off about him, and he kept asking me. He was going to start the Vivitrol injections, and the week later, and he kept asking me about those, and I asked him several times, like, are you having issues? Are you having cravings? Do you want to use? And he kept telling me no, because he didn't want me to know. And
Yeah.
Well, and
he
you
didn't want to
guys-
let us down.
Right.
Yeah.
You're seeing his change, and he's feeling his life is definitely turning around, and for you all to be proud of him, and it is really hard for somebody that struggles with addiction, especially when we don't know. Like, we're feeling good, and then all of a sudden we're feeling like we want to use, and it's a battle within, because why am I thinking like that? I know I don't want to use, but I can't get the craving or the desire, and all of that's coming at us, and it's embarrassing, and that's what we want people to know, that it's not embarrassing to
Right,
say, I
absolutely.
need help. It's not, the biggest step we take is reaching out and trying to get help for our addiction. So once we're in addiction, it's to help them get rid of that shame and the guilt feeling of, here I go again, why am I having these feelings? And so to get people to talk and
Right.
to reach out more.
But I think that's what you've done. I know that's what you did for Keith and even Lauren, my daughter, is it all of a sudden wasn't this thing that we didn't talk about.
Right.
When Keith started his addiction, 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it was a little family secret that nobody talked about. And, every time he'd get incarcerated, everybody'd be like, oh, it's going to be in the paper, but he was an addict, and it didn't define who he was. But I think with every addict, it's just, you have so much shame and guilt because of the things that you've done when you're in active addiction, like the stealing and the lying and just, but, as a mom, we always give that 100th chance, because that's what we do. We'll love you unconditionally, and, you've got to ask for help, and I guess that's, the biggest word I can get out there, because I wish Keith would have asked.
Right, and it is hard. Did you bring a picture of Keith? If you want to just, this is actually a poem that I wrote for Keith, and we're thinking of some things in the future to carry his memory on. We haven't, up until this year, we haven't done that, with another face, adding the actual face to the ministry. And so someone made this for you, and it has our Unchained praises on, the picture, and we're the voice of hope. And since Keith isn't here to be that voice, you guys have decided to be that voice. And, you know, the reason I feel like God led me to ask you guys to be on the show is, I mean, there's a bunch of reasons really, but, you know, you're real adamant about telling people who Keith was, and
Right.
not just about the addiction. And you don't find that in a lot of people. When someone loses their life because of addiction, their family, you know, they're grieving, and a lot of families still don't want to talk about it. And so I think one thing we can kind of help people in the world today with is that you guys have experienced this, and you got to see the sober Keith, and you got to share some of that joy with him, and that you don't want his memory to die. I think, and I work with people a lot today, that it's about not letting their memory die. And when we lose someone, we physically, you know, we don't see them and they're physically not there. But a lot of the healing comes with talking about it and just remembering the good about him and not the addiction. So I'm going to continue to encourage you guys to continue to share who he was, because he needs to be remembered,
Yep.
you know, not for just his addiction. And I think that you guys can definitely help a lot of families out there. And it's still fairly new, you know, it's
Yep.
been this year. And I'm coming up on January 1st, will be 7 years that I lost my fiance. And so I can tell you that it does get a little bit easier. And when you know that you're using his memory to help somebody else, it does get a little bit easier. And I think I've shared this with both of you, that with the person I lost, Tim, if he had a choice to say, if I pass away because of addiction, it could help other people. And if there's a group of people and he was one of them in the group, and God just said, I need one of you to help, I think he would have raised his hand. And I think that about Keith, just knowing what I knew about Keith. And I think that he definitely would have gave
100%.
his life to help somebody else.
Yep.
Just briefly, Amy has another daughter that's actually incarcerated today because of addiction, and so he has 2 children that has struggled with addiction. So I want to ask you guys out there to pray for Laura and her time still while incarcerated. She's doing some classes and really learning about herself. Her brother did pass away while she was incarcerated, so that's another thing on top of being an addict that she has to address and to really work on. And so I ask that you keep Laura in your prayers. If you are a family member that has someone struggling and you just don't know what to do, Nicole and Amy, I'm sure, would be glad to talk to anyone that may need somebody to talk to and to listen to. We encourage you, if you need help yourself, to reach out for help and to know that life can change. We do not have to be defined by our addiction, and we want to remember those who have passed away. Thank you for watching Let's Talk Recovery.